Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to present this motion, to move this motion before the House. But before I move the House, allow me to correct Honorable Kaluma, who is very proud of you that you are his teacher at the University of Nairobi, and also let him know that we were schooling together at the University of Nairobi. So when he's talking about his teachers, he should not also recognize me as one of your teachers, Mr. Karuma, Honorable Karuma. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The motion on the review of the scope of education bursary scheme under National Government Constituency Development Fund and the capitation of learners in primary and junior secondary schools. Madam Speaker, that aware that Article 43(1)(f) of the Constitution, as read together with Article 53(1)(b) and (c), entitles every child to free, quality, and compulsory basic education. Cognizant of the fact that access to funding for education immensely contributes to the realization of the universal access to basic education in the country. Appreciating that Section 48 of National Government Constituency Development Fund, NGCDF Act 2015, establishes education bursary schemes for every constituency towards access of basic education. Noting that Section 48A of NGCDF Act further allows for affirmative action mechanism of allocating additional funds to cater for education bursary scheme and other teaching and related activities, including the feeding program. Concerned that NGCDF Act allocation of bursary schemes under the fund are not more than 5% of the total constituency allocation in a financial year, and thereby limiting the number of cases that may be supported to access the basic education. Further, concerned that the NGCA board has only been approving bursary support to secondary and tertiary education and not primary and secondary, and not primary and junior secondary schools, cognizant of the fact that the failing to extend the bursaries to the primary and junior secondary schools on assumption that the two levels of education are free is a misnomer. Since the government capitation per pupil is inadequate to cater for the mandatory material requirement for the competency-based curriculum education, that is CBC, thereby affecting the pupils whose parents are unable to meet the attendant cost, and deeply concerned that continued exclusion of allocation of the bursary to primary and junior secondary school violates Article 27 of the Constitution, which talks about discrimination and slows down the attainment of universal basic education in Kenya. And now, therefore, this House resolves that the education bursary scheme under Section 48 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, Act 2015, be extended to support learners in primary and junior secondary schools to cater for competency-based curriculum requirements. 2, pursuant to Section 48A of National Government Constituency Development Act 2015, the NGCDF board is in each constituency approves additional allocation to education bursary schemes in order to support the teaching and learning related activities associated with CBC in education, including the school feeding programs. And 3, the government revises the capitation per student in primary and secondary school from the current 1,200 per child per year to 7,760, being the minimum optimal capitation, factoring the new CBC education system and prevailing high cost of living. Madam Speaker, this is an issue which is more of a moral and a constitutional issue. Madam Speaker, if I invite you to Article 27 of the Constitution, the article says very clearly that every person is equal before the law and has a right to equal protection and equal benefit. 2 says equality includes the full and equal enjoyment of all rights and fundamental freedoms. Article 43, Madam Speaker, if I can invite you, is about economic and social rights, and says that is Article 43, 1B. It talks about 1C talks about every person has a right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food and acceptable quality. Madam Speaker, Article 53, which does more on the children rights, it says in particular Article 53, B and C, it says every child has a right to 1, that's B, to free and compulsory basic education. C, every child has a right to basic nutrition. Madam Speaker, the motion before you addresses the issue of not only on the basic education as provided for by Article 53, but also on section C of Article 53, which provides that every child in this country is entitled to basic nutrition. Madam Speaker, you may find that in this year's budget, we provided for 620 billion to improve the quality of education. But that budget, Madam Speaker, did not touch on the quality or provision of nutrition of our children, and that goes hand in hand. Basic education goes hand with basic nutrition. And therefore, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I'm talking about, the motion here is seeking, number 1, to move the Ministry of Education to provide adequate provision for capitation in primary and junior secondary school, because the current capitation only was revised in 2015, but when the new curriculum started, that capitation has not been revised, and that's why it remains per child 1,420 instead of 7,760. Number 2, Madam Speaker, Section 48 and Section 48A of National Constituency Development Fund Act 2015 provides that bursary the amount capitated for bursary is only that 5%, which, Madam Speaker, is not adequate to cater for secondary schools, to cater for TVETs, to cater for universities and colleges. Number 2, under Article 27, the National NGCDF Board has only been approving bursary for secondary and tertiary education, leaving out the primary school students, the primary school pupils. Madam Speaker, under Article 27, that is discrimination. You cannot provide for one part or some of the students and fail to present the other. The second issue, Madam Speaker, is the moral issue. The bursary provided for in the secondary and universities, Madam Speaker, that amount of money goes straight to support their feeding program, because education has already been supported by the capitation. Now, here is the moral issue, Madam Speaker. The secondary school students are being well fed. The university and tertiary students are being well fed, whereas the students in primary schools are being left out without being fed. And Madam Speaker, as a mother, How can you feed an adult and leave out a child who has just been left, who has just come out from the mother's breast? And therefore, Madam Speaker, I'm moving the motion that the NGCDF board need to comply with with section 48A and provide for bursary to support feeding program in our primary school, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. And I request Honorable Adam Dawood, Member of Parliament for Wajir West, to second the motion. Thank you.
Proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am from Wajir East, Wakili, but that's okay. You got the Wajir part right. Madam Speaker, I rise